jump right in.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let's
go
do
ahead.
the
Go
little
ahead.
bit about it. Okay. What was I saying? No, my family, part of my family comes from Ireland, but I grew up in Sydney. I'm from Australia. And
Ah,
so my background is Australia, really, but I think my sort of family origin is Ireland and North England and Germany. And now
okay.
I'm here, but I definitely do not have any Italian in me, unless it's been absorbed over the years.
Well, welcome so much. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. And we were just chatting because Catherine, and you were about to tell me your last name, how to pronounce McNamara.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
McNamara, that's right.
Catherine is
Yeah.
joining us from Italy, and we've just been discussing Italian culture and Europe. And I'm so glad she's joining us today. Catherine is the flash fiction editor of Litro magazine. And everyone who's come out, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, any questions you have, just type them into the chat and I will work them into the conversation. So again, thanks, Catherine. Great to meet you. Great to see you. Um,
Mhm.
and do you want to tell us, just tell us like the history of Litro and then tell us when you came on board and your own involvement with the magazine?
Sure. Well, Litro started in London, and our editor-in-chief is called Eric Akoto, and he's still sort of heading the magazine and doing a really sort of broad and diverse job. It started in London, but now we sort of work in the US as well. We publish a lot of stories from the US. There are sort of two parts to the magazine now, sort of melded a little bit. And I know he started the magazine in his garage in North London. I don't know if he tells everybody that, but I know that's the truth. And it used to be a sort of flyer that you could pick up in bookshops in London,
Oh,
a really sort of tiny chapbook or folded book. And I remember the first time I picked it up in a bookshop in London, and I thought, wow, cool. The stories are great. I'd love to be involved. And I submitted, like everybody does. And I think I had a story in one of the print issues because we run print issues, although they sort of slowed during COVID and then it's mostly online. And we also did a lot of live events, but they've also slowed through COVID. And I had a story that was accepted, a very interesting story actually that I might tell you about later on, accepted for a print issue. And I went to the UK because anytime I'm asked to attend an event or do a reading, I usually say yes because it's good to get out of Italy. It's good to connect with other writers. It's always good practice to speak before an audience. And it's very, very satisfying to read your work. That's sort of, I think, the pinnacle of writing a story. So we had a great event. We did an interview. We talked about the issues of this story because it was quite sort of topical at the time. And Eric asked me to become flash fiction editor of the magazine. And I said yes. And I had no idea what flash fiction was. So I'm probably shouldn't be telling you all of this, but it's is the truth. I wasn't really clear. I just thought, oh, okay, well, short stories that are actually shorter than short stories, because I've always written short stories and published short stories. So I went home and did my research, and I thought, oh, this is actually this is something. This is not poetry. It's not a short story. It's quite complex. And I began began reading because that's my task. I read through the submissions and make a selection every month, and that comes out every Friday. It's called Flash Friday. And some of you might have read or even been published with us. And then I decided, okay, I have to try and understand this form. And so then I started writing flash fiction. So that might lead into a lot more other questions, but I'll just stop there. Otherwise, I go on and on
Sure.
and on.
So when did you come on board? Was this right at the beginning of the magazine?
No, 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 no. It would have been in 2016, at the end of
Oh,
2016. So it's about 7 or 8 years now.
okay. And was there flash fiction before, or did the
Yep.
magazine? Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I think I don't know much about what went on before me. I knew I was more of a short story submitter. So I knew the short story sort of strain of the magazine, not really the flash fiction. But I think since I've come on board, I've worked really hard and really, really enjoyed and really sort of broadened my understanding of the form. I think I got to know a lot of fantastic writers and really learn a lot. And um, I think it's respected. I think this sort of part of the magazine is doing well. We've had stories in the Best Small Fiction anthology Last year we had two. The year before we had two. So I think that the caliber of the stories is really quite high. I mean, the work is wonderful. There's really
Mhm.
some great work coming in. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's great. We have a question here. Could you give us your understanding of what flash fiction is, and maybe define it, like what your exact specifications are for the magazine? Should it be under 1,500,
Hmm.
under 500 words? And then sort of more generally, what you found in your research and what you've seen through
Hmm.
submissions, like what defines the genre?
Okay. Strangely, I've started teaching masterclasses through the COVID because everything sort of shut down on COVID. We started doing masterclasses. So I've actually had to think a lot about that because I've had to formulate what I feel and then what are the criteria for stories for the magazine. Our word length is 800 words. And to be honest, I get really mad when people go over 800 words because guidelines are guidelines. And it's same for me, same for you, same for everybody. So yeah, 800 words. And for me, the story has to be okay. The beauty of flash fiction is that there's room for everybody. There's room for every type of voice. There's okay, you can say, as with a short story, there has to be a beginning and a body and an ending. But that also depends because you can sort of, some people can riff and sort of create a moment, but it still has to evolve. There still has to be an evolution. There still has to be a conclusion.
Mhm.
And for me, there has to be a tiny little sliver of humanity. And that can be something humoristic, something perverse, something generous, something, I don't know, something that enlightens you or something that I wouldn't say twist because I really hate that definition and that sort of pressure put upon an author. But for me, it has to be some sort of enlightenment, but in a small way, with something small and also something big. It depends on your vision, depends on your story, it depends on, what you're really attempting. But it has to be something that I feel inside as well.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. How do you think that effect is achieved in flash fiction? So how can writers think about I mean, obviously, as with all forms of writing, it's everything, right? It's the story,
Hmm.
it's the language, it's the imagery. But
Hmm.
in your experience seeing so many submissions, how do you think writers can achieve that effect
Hmm.
where they're really like making the reader feel something?
I think that it's training, and it's how acute is your ear. I mean, are you able to listen to your idea? Are you able to, first of all, understand an idea and have an idea? I don't believe that you have to write every day and that you're going to come up with something good every day. I mean, good on you if you can, but I just don't think you should put yourself under pressure. I think it's more important that you become your first editor and
Mm.
you use your gut and you understand something is really worth telling.
Mhm.
So I think that requires time and it requires experience and it requires training. So write the story that comes to you, write it in the best way that you can. But if it
Mhm.
doesn't work, throw it away. It's not the end of the world. I mean, we're not talking about 200-page novels here. So it really, really, really has to be special. And it really, for me, Flash has to be a sort of instant of magic. I
Mhm.
mean,
Mhm.
and I think that only comes with training, with really sorting through your ideas and trying, because you'll get, if you're a writer, I think, and you're observing things around you and you're thinking and you're reading and sort of your brain is working, you'll get a whole series of ideas. And I think that's the beauty of being a writer. But then you
Mhm.
have to select the form. I mean, the ideas that are going to work as a flash, that are sort of compact and have this sort of explosive quality. And then there's the ideas that are a short story and they can, bring the reader into different places
Mhm.
of, your mind. Because in a short story, you can have gaps. I mean, you don't have to tell the whole story. I mean, you can really play with the reader, dance with the reader. And then you have a novel idea, which is something that, can go on and on and on and on. But Flash is being sort of compact
Mhm.
and magic. I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you say that because the idea of magic usually doesn't go with training. I think, like you think
Yeah,
magic is like this burst of inspiration, but there really is
yeah.
a lot of training and study and
But
practice.
it's both, yeah. But it's
Yeah.
both because if you and I really believe in getting in the zone, and that means a good night's sleep. I mean, emptying the deck of your brain and being sort of very clear-headed. I really believe in being reasonably healthy to write and
Mhm.
definitely focused and not distracted. And I think when you give yourself the right conditions and you practice so that you're a good editor, writer, and everything on the page, then I think that's when the good ideas come, or you listen to them, or you bring them forth.
Mhm.
So it's all
Yeah.
bringing something together.
Yeah, I really like that. So you're like taking care of your whole body. You're not just, there's
It
a lot that goes
helps.
into writing. People don't often talk about
Yeah.
that. There's a lot that goes into writing that isn't just, sitting at your desk every day for an hour, but also taking care of yourself and clearing your head and making sure the conditions are,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think that's something that you really have to ask yourself as a writer. I mean, how am I going to get the best story out my brain? I mean, how am I
Mhm.
going to produce my best work? I don't want to write a mediocre story, a story that's just, yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to write something meaningful. I mean, something resonant. I want to write my best work possible. So, yeah, that does mean looking after yourself, I
Mhm.
think.
So going back to that period where you were doing research to study the form and you had that kind of like, oh, can you tell us like what was it about it that surprised you
Mhm.
or struck you as different from other kinds of fiction?
Just the intensity. It was,
Mm,
it was the intensity. I didn't want to read up about it because I not really like that. I don't like reading up about anything. I think that's
mm,
just me. I just reject everything. I wanted to work it out myself. And I
mhm,
had already started reading selections, so I already had a fair idea of, what other people were doing and what worked. But I really didn't want to copy. I always get afraid of copying other people's ideas. So I just thought, okay, fine, get it. And then the year that I really got seriously about writing my own flash fiction, I had my last kid at school. And any of you with teenagers might know how much of a challenge it can be putting, especially the last child, because they're always spoiled, etc., through high school. So I had like a year of hell, I
mm,
confess. And so I didn't have the brain power to stick with a novel. I was too angry at myself to write good short stories. And I was
mhm,
also doing a lot of driving. And for me, driving is writing stroke thinking time because I don't listen to anything, I only listen to my ideas. And I'm sure everybody's got their own sort of writing zone where their brain sort of loosens up. And so I made myself drive this kid to school, stop screaming at Italian male, sorry, drivers abusing me on the way home. And then I would make myself sit down and write a 500-word story
mm,
about anything. And then these stories sort of did actually form a shape. I wanted to write a story about love, a collection about love, about the arc of love through our lives, like young life, middle-aged life, older. I
mm,
mean, young love, middle-aged love, and older love, but not in a romantic way, in a sort of oblique way, sort of slicing through it. And the stories did form a book, and I just made myself sit down and go.
mm,
Really, I wrote a story about a man falling off a mountain, and
mm.
he was actually a really nasty man. He sort of deserved to die. Not really, but in the story, that's how it came out. I
Right.
wrote about somebody who was, um, anything that I saw. I just made myself produce a story, and it was fun. It was
Yeah.
really fun.
That's interesting. So were you doing that as your own kind of training or just as like stress relief from the chaos of
Okay,
living?
it was stress relief. To be
Yeah.
honest, it was stress relief. But I find creativity and writing for me is just my other world. And it
Mhm,
also makes me feel productive.
mhm,
I wasn't being particularly productive in that period economically. And
mhm,
so I kept my mornings, a few hours in the mornings to, yeah, just throw myself into this form that became a book. And then I started, as soon as I was happy with some of the stories, I started submitting and there was a tiny bit of traction. And then eventually I got it published.
mm,
So, yeah, I think because people often ask me about collections. How do I put a collection together? How do I make the stories connect? And I've done a lot of work with people about this, and I find it really interesting because everybody's different. And
Hmm.
it is quite hard. But the way that I did this particular collection is that I went from A to Z and I practically didn't change anything. But that
Oh,
depends on you. That depends on what your practice is, really.
sure. So we have two related questions. So were the flash pieces in your collection all under 500 words?
No, some of them actually went to 1,200, 1,300. There are a couple of them that I think I was enjoying myself too much with the story. And so they became sort of minor short stories. But most of them were, the shortest one is 49 words. I
Oh,
do
wow.
remember that. Yep. But most of them were around 500,
Hmm.
600, 800.
Hmm.
And but I tried to vary them. I made a conscious choice to vary them because I knew that I wanted to put a book together, and so the length of the story depended on the voice and what I was trying to resolve. The
Hmm.
collection was published. Yeah, it's called Love Stories for Hectic People, and I think it's in another room. It's not here.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's something that I'm happy with. I did.
Um, mhm. So we have a question, what about very short flash? And I think that question means, is there a distinction, or how do you distinguish between 500 word stories and 1,000 word stories? Like what's the difference in shape? What do they need to achieve?
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, One of the great writers, and I do not remember who it was, always said, finish the story before the ending. And I believe that, and begin the story, when the story's already started. So I think the story is the story.
Mhm.
So it depends on your material and it depends on the resolution of your idea. And the main thing that I would say is with the beginning of the story, get straight into it. No backstory, just do it. Just
Mhm.
get it out there and make your first sentence strong, simple, and related to the sort of the key of if you think of a story as a tiny piece of music, everything's in the same key or there's some sort of modulation and there's some sort of cadence at the end. So everything sort of has to weave together, fit together, and finish.
Mhm.
So the microfiction, if you also want to know about that, microfiction is real magic. I think it's something that you have to sort of pull off. I think it's almost like gymnastics. You think of those ladies who do the exercises on the bars and everything. I think microfiction is a little bit like that because it's not like poetry, because poetry has space and breathing space and structure. Micro is sort of like a little miracle, I think. I think it's very hard to write well because people make the mistake of doing of presenting something or describing something and it's not an actual story. Like when I read something that's even really short, I still want a story. I want
Mhm.
somebody to be telling me a story. I don't just want a description, because sometimes I get submissions and the language is beautiful and there's something, and but it's description, it's not a story. There's no sort of point or purpose or a story. There has to be a story.
Mhm. Yeah. And
So
does Litro accept microfiction?
yes, yeah. We don't have a specific area for microfiction, but I've published microfiction in the Friday Flash series. Even recently, I think we've had some micro pieces up and there, 400 words, 300 words. I've
Mhm.
published a couple that are practically a paragraph and not much more because they just worked.
Mhm.
So I think try anything, really. Just
Mhm.
make sure that the idea is clear and make sure you produce your idea and you sort of finish it and begin it well.
Sure. So if a piece is not working for you, or
Mm,
a piece that you see come in over the transom, where do you dig in to try to find how to fix it? Do you
hmm
just scrap it and start all over, or is there like a common method that you use to assess a piece and kind of get back in there?
mm. Okay, when I'm mentoring, so mentor people, the first thing that I ask them is, okay, if it's a big project, I'll say, what do you want the reader look at your book? Okay, this is dealing with a book though. Look at
Mhm.
your book from far away and imagine that you're the reader who's just closed the book and got to the last page. What do you want that reader to feel inside? What do you want them to say? Oh, that book was about, da da da, or that story was about da da da. I mean, think about what you want to give to the reader. But with a shorter piece that's not working, I would just ask the writer to think carefully, what do you want to say? You
Mm.
know, what is your story about? Tell me what it's about. And you should be able to say that, but the story is about light, or the story is about, a girl who died squashed by a turtle. I mean, it has to be about something, and you have to be able to relate that. But I also think you really have to ask yourself, because so many people are writing, is this the strongest idea that I have right now?
Mm.
And go with it. Are you
So,
the only reader for your section? No, I'm actually the only reader. So yeah. I think the short story section, because the volume of the pieces is longer, but I read really quickly, and I'm the only reader. Really, there used to be a US section and a UK section, but I think they're actually together at the moment. So, yeah, sometimes I do worry about that, and I've talked about that with our editor-in-chief, because I have my taste, and I
mm.
worry, and I do try and vary, and I read a lot of very different things. And even when I mentor people who are doing creative nonfiction poetry. I mean, I it's not that I'm only interested in one type of style or content matter, but I do. That is something, like, I wouldn't want to limit the magazine or limit the people who are being published. So yeah, I do think about that. But yes, I am the only reader. Yes.
Can you take us through your process? So pieces get submitted directly to you, and then it's just accept, reject. How many submissions do you get per week? How many do you accept? Do you work with
It
writers?
depends. Yeah, it depends. Sometimes a great big, pages and pages. And unfortunately, some people, you can tell straight away that they haven't read the magazine. I mean, there's a reason why, if you read the guidelines, they say, read about what we actually publish, because, yeah, some stories are way off the mark, as
Mm.
in they don't sort of correspond with our content matter at all.
Mm.
Um, and so that you can tell straight away. And I generally, this is just me, I don't like stuff that's really political. And I definitely don't like stuff with a lot of violence. That sort of, makes my stomach turn. Violence against women, I can't do any, or children dying. I can't do stuff like that. So, I mean, violence is real because it exists, obviously. But yeah, not sort of superfluous violence, definitely not politics.
Mhm.
Sex, if it's good, I mean, humor, it's very hard to pull off something that involves humor and sex and happiness. It's very hard to write about happiness.
Mhm.
I mean, it's much easier to write a depressing story than a happy story. So I don't really, apart from that, I don't have any preferences.
Mhm.
I'll take anything, anything.
Mhm.
I mean, I used to just, oops.
Are you familiar with Flash authors who write in Italian? And if so, how might it be different than English?
I don't read literary magazines in Italian,
Mm.
to be honest. I just don't have time. I just don't have time. I mean, I could read in Italian. I've worked as a translator, but I'm definitely not informed about Italian literary magazines. I'm sorry. I could. I mean, I don't even do translation at work anymore. I used to do scientific and historical translation work, because literary translation, you get so involved if you're a writer, your little heart's in there. So I'd rather just do, yeah, technical stuff. So no, sorry, I don't don't know.
And it's interesting because you mentioned your own sort of tastes and preferences, and I'm wondering how that matches with the overall identity of the magazine. Are there certain pieces that you feel like, yes, this is exactly what Litro wants to project to the world? Or are there pieces that you love, but you don't accept because they don't quite fit with like the brand image of the magazine?
This is a really tough question, because I'm not working alone. So definitely my but the thing is, I agree with most of the work. I mean, I enjoy the magazine. I always enjoyed the magazine. And the thing that I really like about Litro is that it's completely international. And so what I really like about my job is that I do get a lot of international submissions. And anytime I connect with a writer who comes from the African continent, from the Asian continent, I mean, I actually keep in touch with some of the writers because it just happens that way. And because I lived for a long time, I'm in, exile myself. I'm a migrant myself. I'm not living where I grew up. So I have a sort of, yeah, open mind about things like that. I lived for a long time in Ghana, so West Africa. I have a sort of soft spot for West Africa, so I'm really happy to publish. We get a lot of submissions from Nigeria, from China, India,
Mm.
and talking about internationally, and I really love, I love to publish that.
Mhm.
One of the things that I might say now that's a bit weird but interesting is that I like sometimes you can see that people they're writing in English and it's their second language. And
Mm.
so they have a different take on English because sometimes American people write in a certain way, English people in a certain way. And then you'll get internationals who you can tell, I mean, because I speak other languages too. And so you have a different sort of framework and a
Mhm.
different entry point for the language. And I find sometimes that work is really interesting.
Mhm.
Really, it's just a different take on English.
Yeah,
That's all. So
that's
I'm
really
definitely
interesting.
not biased in any way. I'll take anything. I mean, I'll read anything.
Uh-huh. So will you publish a work like that in its original form to try to be true to the writer, or do you try
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
translate
yeah, yeah,
it?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, no. If it's sort of the quirkiness, if you like, that
Mhm.
appeals to me. I mean, I've also published translations from Arabic, I think, recently. When we're submitted a translation and we publish the English text, we don't publish the original text. And anybody who does write English in that sort of slightly unusual way, no, I wouldn't correct it. I enjoy it, I think.
Yeah. So what are themes, ideas that you tend to see a lot of in submissions? I think this is really helpful
Mm.
information for writers because we don't know. We're just, isolated in our
Mm.
little, in our writing office or wherever. So we don't
Mm.
know what editors are seeing a lot of. And sometimes it's really helpful to
Sure.
hear, like we're just getting so many submissions with people and goats.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do this in an original way because there are thousands of goat submissions.
I know. I I did have look. People ask me that, and I do have sort of a reply that I used to give, but then I sort of caught myself out because I said it's really hard to write about people. People send story. I mean, we all have terrible suffering in our lives to different degrees, and so you do get stories quite frequently about cancer and about dementia, and I think um it's really hard to write a good story about cancer or dementia, and I know they're key issues because they touch almost all of our lives. So I think it's really hard to write something, and it's not our magazine is not exactly the forum for that. But then once I remember saying to a class or something, and dogs, people write me stories about dogs, and then I remembered, last year or the year before we had a story in the best small fictions, and the story was called The Dogs of Kerala, and it was about stray dogs in Kerala in India, and I'd chosen it. So, like, don't listen to me. So yeah, because normally I would say, please don't write a story about your dog, and then there you go. This was a
Mhm.
fantastic story about dogs.
Yeah.
So, but then dementia and cancer, I think that's pretty hard. I get a lot of road trip stories, and sometimes they're great, sometimes they're very typical. A lot of war veteran stories. I get a lot of this is definitely something that I would avoid. People trying to write gangster stories, and you think, oh my God, they've been watching too much Netflix. And you just think, stop, stop, stop with the guns. I mean, but that sort of gangsterish type violence and silly type language, I do get some of that, and I just think, come on, get serious. Just,
Mhm.
I would rather hear about taking the garbage bin out. And I actually wrote a story myself that begins with a guy taking the garbage bin out. So I think, yeah, cliches, avoid cliches unless you're going to do them really well. So,
Mhm. Mhm. What about stylistically? Are there a lot of things that you see people starting in a very similar way over and over again,
Yeah.
ending in a similar way?
Yeah. There's definitely a voice. Sometimes there is a particular voice I get from American writers, and there is a particular voice that I get from English writers. This is very general, but I was talking the last sort of mentoring thing that I did in January. We talked about that because we had American and English writers together, and it's lovely when you get people who are all, native English speakers, but from completely different cultures. I find that really interesting, and people are actually talking about, my God, yeah, we are so like that. And I think, um, yeah, there's differences in style, but it's the story that has to be, the story that is more important. The story is the car, is the vehicle. I mean, this is the thing that has to be brought out and brought alive, I think.
Mhm.
Has print and web versions as writers, what do you think we should know about? Oh, I can't read the end of the question. It doesn't come up.
Oh, so
Um,
there are print and web version as right. What should writers know about the difference between submitting to the print versus the web
sure.
edition? Um,
Okay.
and are there two formats in order to cover more ground? So is more work published online than in print?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and
Mm.
does one format have more prestige or cachet than the other?
Um, okay, I had a story in the print and I was very happy about that. But then if you think about it online, where we do churn out a lot more stories, it's there forever. Who's going to read your print story unless you get, issue number, blah, blah, blah. So of course, yes, there's prestige in print and there always, there has been forever, but I think things are changing
Mhm.
a little bit there. The print issues are themed. So you'd have to look at the current theme, and sometimes they have guest editors, and they're usually beautiful, absolutely beautiful productions. And so it is really an honor to be inside of one. They have great, graphic design and cover material. And we used to, although they haven't started up again, we used to have sort of a launch and or tied into a festival.
Hmm.
And I've been to some of them in London, and they've been great. I think, but even internationally, I think they've done events in India, but that was before my time. I don't know. Maybe something might be happening in the US, but I really don't know. But
Mhm.
the online version is definitely, alive. It's going. It's changing day by day. So I would try and get into anything. I mean, whatever. I think the first thing to do is write, and then find out where you feel like submitting to.
Mhm. Sure.
That's all.
And the magazine does a lot. There's a culture section, there are workshops. Can you tell us sort of more broadly about everything the magazine offers?
Yeah, I can't even keep up with everything myself, to be honest, because I have a hard time keeping on top of my submissions. But there's Tuesday Tales, there's Sunday Stories, there's Friday Flash Fiction, and then there's the whole non-fiction section that I am not up to date with. I'm not on top of because it's a big team, and the team is international. It's very hard when we even have a team meeting because we have people in different time zones. Um, with COVID, we started doing a masterclass series, and we have courses in flash fiction because I'm teaching that. We have sensuality in writing, and I think I'm teaching in June. I think there's a no, or May. I think there's a May June section. It's on the website, and we have poetry, and then there's a few sort of single one-off sessions every so often. I mean, last year they did one about resilience and sort of different sections. Sorry, I didn't prepare, so I can't sort of tell you off the top of my head.
That's okay. We have a question. Are you teaching any Zoom classes in the near future?
Yeah, I am. That's the one that I should be able to tell you about. I think it's sensuality and writing, or it's May. It's a 4 week course. We do an hour a week, and this is the sensuality course is a lot of fun
Hmm.
because I always wanted to teach. I have a lot of not necessarily sex, but I mean people and big people stories. And I know that a lot of writer friends have always said to me, "Oh my God, how can you write about sex?" Oh, and so one of my dreams was to teach a course about writing sex, but not sex as in erotica. I don't write that. And so I wrote the course myself. My boss was really lovely. He said, "Yeah, do what you want." And so, because I had a great time and developed all these exercises just to make people just let go and just write this, think about story and then find the tools within themselves using their senses and their access to sort of language and experience to come out with stories. And I don't know, every time I've done the course, we just have a blast. And people produce really good work. I mean, work that's then gone into the magazine, essentially.
Oh, someone
Oh,
is just sharing
oh, that's it.
information about the class.
Oh,
That's great.
good.
And then the question is the class craft oriented or is it generative or both?
What I aim for is for everybody to have a submission ready piece of work or pieces of work. And I give you a lot of, not a lot, but homework from week to week. So I expect you, just because it makes everything more meaningful if you produce work, on your own at home. I think it's really hard on a lesson to be put on the spot. It's fine to do little exercise, but you can't really write a story. And so I give people homework and we, exchange. I critique work. I do a lot of critiquing when the courses are on. And no, it's good. And the aim really at the end of it is to produce something that's ready to submit. I can't guarantee publication in Litro, but I have published a couple of stories of people's work that I fell in love with, and I said, I'm not letting this go.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also do a flash fiction one, and I think that's in July, but I think we have to move July. But there's a flash fiction course that's also a 4-week course.
Mm-hmm. So
And
broadening out to the magazine generally, is it, are you guys independent or are you affiliated with any organization, university?
I think in the US, and I know nothing about the US side of the magazine because I'm in my little, my little flash fiction train. But yes, I think there are a lot of affiliations with American universities. But I cannot tell you which at all. Sorry. And I mean, the Arts Council in the UK gives funding, and I know there are different organizations behind the magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a sister daughter magazine that's just come out called Crayon, and that deals more with art and fine arts, really. I think that was launched in March, but I don't even have a copy yet in my house. So it's very broad.
I noticed on the About page, it says that the magazine sits at the intersection of technology and the arts. And I was curious if there is like a specific focus on technology or if technology is used in like innovative ways in the magazine.
Not in my corner of the magazine, no, definitely. But I sort of like geeky stories, to be honest, and I publish quite a few science fiction stories, which normally I wouldn't veer towards unless it's just, the great big, old school science fiction stories that everybody's read. But I've had some fantastic science fiction submissions that I've pushed through. And so that's all I can say about my part of the magazine and technology, really.
Sure. And a question, are there any individual flash writers that inspire you?
Oh gosh. I don't want to get personal. I mean,
well, actually, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just thinking on my desk, I've got a copy of a book by Laurie Moore. I like Amy Hempel. I really like there's also a guy who's published quite a lot with us called Louis Gallo. He's a US writer. He's great. Many of people who I would sort of call my colleagues, I think, who are in the Best Small Fictions anthology that's coming out from last year, 2022. I mean, a lot of the stories in that are writers that I know, and I think their work is wonderful. There's a guy called Mustafa Anesi. He was with us for a while. He won one of our competitions. His work is wonderful. I think if you want to look for really, really inspiring flash fiction writers and a great sort of variety of writers, just pick up a copy of one of those anthologies. I think you'll find the best, really the best that there are. And yeah, because I've looked at them. I've looked at the PDF. I haven't got my copy yet because I have a story in last year's, and the stories are amazing. So I would look there for inspiration if you want to read the best They're really good.
Best small fictions, is that?
It's called the Best Small Fiction Anthology.
Mm.
And last year's anthology has been a bit slow being published, but I know it's sort of coming out now. I think it
Mm.
was meant to come out before, but I know it's coming out now. I don't have my copy yet, but I think I've looked at the PDF file and it's just amazing. It's an amazing collection. No, it's not by Litro. It's the guy who's the editor is called Nathan Leslie, and it's published by Sondar Press, Sonder Press, and
Mm.
it's like the Pushcart Prize. It's one of those
Yeah.
big American competitions that's run every year.
They
The
actually just
stories are
had a
great.
big issue because I think Sonder Press is no longer publishing them. So that's a whole, yeah, that's a whole other, but they
I
are
think
still continuing to publish.
everybody's
Yeah.
crossing their fingers.
Right,
They're
right.
to see their copy.
So that question actually relates to a question that I had, because you mentioned this writer that you've published a lot of that you love in the magazine, and I was wondering if you could just take us through one piece that really sticks out for you, as why you published it, what it did,
Okay.
how it pulled you in, and why it worked for you.
Okay. I'll have to look at it on my telephone if you don't mind.
Sure.
And I'll just go to our webpage and find the thing. Because I actually have a story coming out every week. Um, and the other night. Okay, but I have to read the story again because I
Okay.
read so much I don't
If
remember.
it's too much trouble, it's okay. I
Um,
just was thinking if there was like something off the top of your head that, like this one line or this one technique they used.
um, okay, this is the last one that's come up, and it's called Lions and Bears, and it's more even been sort of like prose poetry more than flash, and it's a guy dreaming, and he dreams about lions and bears. And
Mm.
it's actually a dream, which was not something that I would recommend. I think dreams are really bad things to use in stories. And
Mhm.
it's very it's funny. I mean, he just wakes up and has a dream, and I don't know, he has to go back and feed the bears or feed the lions in this dream. There's no literary reason that I can tell you why I like this story. You see, the other thing that I have to think when I'm selecting stories is there has to be a variation from week to week. I can't
Mm.
publish something that's sort of, full of literary language and imagery or something like that every single week, or like something that's very female every
Mhm.
week. And interestingly, I don't know the breakdown of your audience this evening, but I get a lot more submissions from ladies, from women, than from men.
Mhm.
And and sometimes they're a lot better. I really shouldn't say that, should I? But I think it's the intricacy of the idea and being and this sort of attention to detail. Sometimes I think it can work well. Please, I hope everybody's not really angry at me now. but I mean, that's just that I'm talking about the breakdown of my submissions. I do get a
Right.
lot from women, and I actually get a lot of men who've obviously had bad love stories, and they talk about they're on the tube in London. I have a lot of tube stories. The underground
Mm.
railway system that you catch in London, and so I have a lot of breakups, a lot of breakup stories. Yeah, that's another thing that I would dodge
Mm.
unless you've got a good entry point. Or I mean, there are plenty of breakup stories that I've published with the magazine, but there has to be something that's sort of beyond breakup, because breakups are so, we've all been there.
Mm. Yeah.
So, but I can't say there's I think first sentence has to be strong, and like I said before, some sort of evolution or transformation, and some sort of cadence at the end, and you've got to give me something that I didn't have before.
Sure. And
That
so if a
helps.
writer receives a rejection from you, should
Mm.
they keep trying, and should they send new work right away? And how does that how should a writer take a rejection?
Yeah, okay. Please don't hate me if I rejected your work because usually I've been doing lots and lots of reading. And for me, the thing that really makes me feel, oh, I love the world is if I reject somebody's work and they write back and they say thank you, because it's a very thankless task. I mean, any of you who are also editors for magazines, it's it's hard work, and nobody ever says, good work, Catherine, go to bed, fine, you've done well. It's something that you really, well, for me it's important and I try and do my best. But a rejection, first of all, we use a template, so it's definitely not something that I write. It's a template that comes from the magazine and probably should even be adjusted or softened or something. I don't think it's, sometimes I adjust it if I have time. And if it's a story that I've held on to for a long time, because that's the problem with submissions. You get your top end submissions that are just, wow, I'm going to take this, I don't want to lose it, I love it, this is mine. And then you get these, okay, and then on the other end you get stories that are absolutely inappropriate for the magazine, or their writers are at the beginning of their writing career, so they need a bit more practice. Or you get these stories, these sort of middle grade stories, which are good, and they sort of linger, and you keep them there because you sort of, uh, but the amount of time, and I'm not sort of, that's not part of my task to sort of go through and because it would amount to critiquing and mentoring and helping, and that takes a lot of time because it's more than one draft if you ask somebody to improve some aspect of their story, and that's,
Mm.
I would if I could, but that becomes something else. And so sometimes I do hold on to these sort of medium stories that are good, but they're not good enough. And so sometimes I feel really bad about that because I hold on to them because there is some aspect that's good. I mean, we produce work that has, lovely lines and lovely lyricism and some meaningfulness, but then we can also have, crap in the next
Mhm.
paragraph because we weren't focusing, or we've lost our track, we've lost track or something. So yeah, writing is work, and sort of editing and fixing up. So at the end of our template, it always does say thank you and please do submit again. And sometimes I do add personal comments like, I really like this aspect of your story, or I'm sorry I held on to it, the voice was good, or something. I try.
Mhm.
But if you believe that your work is a good fit for the magazine, I would always say try again and again and again. I mean, I do the same thing myself with
Mhm.
magazines, so I would just say keep going, just
Mhm.
keep going.
And when you say you hold on to the piece, what does that mean? You're just sort of deliberating a little longer?
Yeah, because it all goes into submittable. So you have your stories that are in progress, and they're ones that you've read once. I unless it's a story that's completely unsuitable or something that I definitely fall in love with in 2 seconds, I read everything 3 to 5 times. I mean, you've got to give it a second read if you're uncertain, even if you are certain, actually, because you've got to be fair to the writer. And, sometimes you're tired, sometimes you're overworked, sometimes your brain is in a different place. So you have to read things more than once.
Sure.
And the things that I hold on to are, yeah, sometimes they're things that I want to give, stories that I want to give a chance,
Mm.
or, yeah, they're just not strong enough because some stories are just not strong enough. They're just
Mhm.
not.
Mhm.
So, and then maybe it's the idea that's not strong enough, or the ending that sort of is weak, or
Mhm.
clumsy. There are so many reasons why a story is not right.
Sure.
So
So if people wanted to get involved with the magazine on the editorial side, are there ever any opportunities to
mm,
be readers, volunteers in any way?
definitely, I think every so often there is a call out for editorial help. You'd have to check on the website, um, but I know recently there was something, because I do remember seeing something.
Mhm.
But yeah, definitely. I think there's opportunities for work. I mean, literary magazines, it's sort of arty, but it's not, well paid or anything like that.
Mhm.
There's no, don't come into it thinking, wow, big time, big magazine. I mean, most magazines have a hard time sort of getting ahead, and you do it because you love the idea of the magazine. My biggest satisfaction, I have to say, having done this for so many years, and that's the reason why I think I'll, keep going until they get sick of me, is just the satisfaction of getting younger writers out there, people from different countries out there, older writers who've never been published. One of the ladies who did, I think she did a centrality course with me, or maybe it was Flash, I don't remember. A 70-year-old, or perhaps even more, writer from Canada, and she started publishing after our workshop. I mean, and I was very, very okay. Yeah, that's me. That's my part of the magazine. Yeah,
Mm,
but I find it very satisfying when people get ahead, when people get their work out there. I mean, I remember voices. I remember people's work when it makes an impact. I
yeah.
love that. It's
That was
great.
actually my last question, which is what I ask all editors, which is what keeps you doing this? I know for so many it's a labor of love. It's very
Yeah,
arduous. It's a
it
battle
is.
out there in the literary world to be seen, recognized. And it's a lot of
Yeah.
hard work. So what keeps you at it? What keeps you motivated? What keeps you inspired?
Okay, two of my big moments of satisfaction last year, me and my big mouth suggested that we do a competition. So we did a competition, and the theme was nature. And there were 200 entries, which, because I'm very stubborn and determined and dedicated, I read myself because I just took my computer away to a Greek island where I was and I read story after story after story after story. And two of our sort of top entries, I think they were second and third place, both made it into the best small fictions
Mm,
anthology last year. And young-ish writers, I'm not sure of their age, one woman from Colombia, one guy from Nigeria, stories, brilliant stories. I mean, it didn't matter where they were from, they just happened to be from these countries. And for me, that was like a defining moment. Like, I would have thrown my computer into the sea and said, I never want to read another piece of flash fiction again. And yet I went on and I went on and I went on. And no, this is why you do it. When
right.
I mean, I know everybody's different, and I've spoken to other writers who are like, "Why would you give away all of your energy to something like this?" And da 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 da. Da. But I really believe that the energy goes around, and
Yeah.
what you put out there, it comes back in terms of friendship, readership. I mean, many, many, many different ways. But definitely for me, it's very satisfying when people do well. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's
And
really good.
are you open for flash submissions year round?
Yes, yes, yes. Send anything. Again,
Mm.
please don't be mad if I reject you. I mean, please. It's not personal. It's never personal. Really.
We won't be. Well, thank you so much. This was so informative and lovely. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. It was great to hear all this.
Thank you for having me, and good luck to everybody. And keep writing, keep writing.